Well, Victoria Redstall is here now to tell us all about it, and of course this is a massive move from the daughter of a chartered accountant,
chartered surveyor,
and then you moved to America, and it was, you think, a childhood event when you were about 11 that led you to this particular interest. What happened?
It was a very close family, friends of ours, that were, a couple of people were murdered, 4 of them were shot, and he was a very close family friend to all of us, was the father of them. He was the man that was shot, and his name was Nick. And it was very traumatic at the time, but it made me very interested in the mindset of the most warped people, which at the time, that was a mass murderer. And serial killers and mass murderers, I didn't know the difference back then. But I watched television, I watched the news, I watched documentaries, I read books, and I found it very interesting. Not obsessed.
Well, it's a big move from reading the stories and watching the news to deciding that in actual fact you want to meet them and get into their heads. So first of all, what's the route? How do you get in? How did you get the pass?
Well, the route, I didn't even plan this. Moved to America when I was 19, went to school for acting, went to school for broadcasting. They don't want the English accent on the local news, which I would love to have done, but I cannot speak American accent.
Yeah.
When I was given the opportunity, because I host a lot of television shows and commercials and infomercials, I do that in America. When I got the opportunity and I was offered to be a host of a show, a new pilot, called Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer, I thought, my gosh, this is so exciting, because I've always studied that mindset. So I thought, I don't need to be the host, I want to be the one to interview the killer. The production company were quite shocked, and they said, well, if you go out and you find us a serial killer, we'll talk about it.
So, OK, so obviously you've got this interest in this, so it's exciting, but then actually sitting face to face opposite somebody who has committed the most horrendous crime, I mean, and being a woman as well, and not just any woman, I mean, you're an attractive woman as well. I mean, did that not cause you problems along the way?
I don't wear any makeup, I wear my hair tied back, I wear a business suit. I don't come across, I don't think, sexy at all. But I wanted the insight into the minds. I didn't want to be a psychiatrist and go studying. You can sit in a school for years or a university and never really get into the mind of a serial killer, where I sit in a cage and have breakfast and lunch, because I sink my teeth into any subject matter. That's why my book's called Serial Killers Up Close and Very Personal.
So obviously, in order to, I mean, when you interview anyone, if you're going to get anything out of anybody, be them a serial killer or just a normal person,
yes,
you need to have, there has to be that trust.
Yes.
They need to be able to trust you to a certain extent. So how do you get someone like that to earn your trust?
Because you come across with no fear. Obviously, I've studied them, so I know what they've done. Come across with no fear, and you've got to have some kind of relationship and a banter back and forth. They can consider me their friend. They're not my friends. I understand what they did, but I don't have any empathy or sympathy. They belong where they belong. But I gained the trust by not firing questions and by opening up my own life. I'm very, private where I live, so I don't open up where I live, my involvement with my relationship. But I do give them a bit of what I did that day or a month ago or a year ago where I grew up.
Well, you got to know Wayne Adam Ford
yes,
in
well.
a Californian prison. He murdered 4 prostitutes between 97 and 98. He handed himself in. He was carrying a Ziploc bag containing a severed breast.
Yes.
So these are not people to be treated lightly. I assume, are you on the other side of a big thick screen?
No, I sit in a cage for 5 hours, padlocked in with the serial killer. So.
And then you've got someone. I mean, you actually spent a lot of time with him. He continued to phone you after you'd done your research,
right.
and he continued to call you quite a lot. So, were you happy to accept his calls after your work had finished?
He was calling me during my work every single day. I made a full-length documentary which was sold overseas.
Yeah.
He did call me every day. I didn't want to cut the guy off completely, let him call once a month. Now, I probably let him call once every 6 months for a 15-minute call. That's the least I can do for someone who opened up his entire life to me.
But some of the media in America thought that there was a sort of a romantic involvement.
That's the media trying to sensationalise something, a story that has got no romance in it whatsoever, never would be, not at all. That's the media.
Well, then you've got someone, the Keith Hunter Jesperson, the happy face killer, killed 8 people between 1990 and 95, got his name for the smiley faces he put on the letter to the media and his victims' families. You say that he was a manipulator, a nasty man, and that, in fact, you felt that he was manipulating you.
He manipulated me on a different subject. He'd written paintings with his signature with a happy face, and he sent them out. Somehow the prison didn't want me there because I was getting too deep into the story of some wrongful convictions. 2 people were accused of his crimes. So he made me go to the watch commander to find out the real reason as to why he's been put in the hole. They said it's the paintings. He thought it was because I was there. So it really had nothing to do with his crimes. But that's the only time a serial killer has manipulated me.
So were you finding out things that didn't necessarily come out during the trial? Were you finding more about the stories, more answers, possibly actually for the families of the victims? Were you finding unanswerable questions, questions that they had that sometimes don't get answered in trial?
I was finding out that, but more importantly, I was finding out their childhood and what really goes into the lethal cocktail that makes a monster. That's what's more important to me, coming from the horse's mouth, not coming from books.
Because you said they would never get sad or cry when they were talking about their victims, but they could become very emotional when talking about their family and their childhood and or a pet dying or something.
There's a lot of misconceptions around these people, and they do have consciences. They love their families. They love their neighbours, their co-workers. But when they have a victim type they choose, they will kill that person and usually have no conscience and no remorse about it. However, months go by and they sit in a courtroom and they see the mother of some innocent woman that they killed, or the father or a daughter, and they actually really have emotion for the family member of the person they destroyed.
So do you have sympathy for them?
No sympathy, no empathy, no compassion, but I understand them.
And so what would you say after spending that amount of time on death row with these dangerous rapists, murderers, criminals? What have you learnt?
I've learned that serial killers are made, they are not born. They are made into this world, usually a bad childhood, neglect, abuse, possible brain injury, possible addiction to either alcohol or drugs, and the combination, all of those things can, not always, but can form a monster, be it a serial killer, a murderer of any sorts. That's what it can form. So we need to nurture our children. That's the most important thing in life. And also the women that go onto the streets to become prostitutes, they need to really think of a better job, or they need to be better protected with law enforcement, and law enforcement shouldn't turn the blind eye to these women that are desperate.
Some women would say it would be nice and easy to think we could find another job, but unfortunately circumstances don't allow us to do such a thing.
But they need to be more aware that they are a target of a serial killer, not because they're easy prey, but because they're thought so low of, which is such a sad thing. We all need to communicate more and be more aware of who we're raising in this world and who we need to protect in this world.
Will you feel, if any of these men go to the chair or the lethal injection, will you feel sad for any of them, the ones that you met?
There will be an element because I've bonded with them. I'll bond with any human I spend time with. And there is that element of small part of goodness in each one of them. Because if anyone can find the goodness, it's me. And I don't know how I do it, but I found it. So with that element of goodness, I can compartmentalize the horrific crimes they did. As I watch them die, I've been invited to a few executions.
Have you been?
Haven't been yet, but I will have a small part of me. But what is more important is the victims.
Yeah.
That will override everything.
So if you get that, if the time is right, would you go to an execution?
I think to learn, to be there, to understand, to see that, yes, I will.
Gosh, wow. Well, this is the book, Serial Killers, Up Close and Very Personal, and this is out now, and it's fascinating. You are a brave, brave lady.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. Right, still to come, EastEnders actor Charlie G. Horrifying.